You're listening to WOSD. Greetings, everyone. It's Layla Palmer, and welcome back to another installment of our podcast programming. In this episode, hosted by Kelly Thompson Clark, OSD's Director of Environmental Purchasing, Julia Wolfe, will share the previous efforts of the Environmentally Preferable Products program.
It seemed nothing short of miraculous, the shift that occurred in our global environment during the pandemic. While the world was relegated to their homes, a subtle change was happening around us. I'm sure you've all seen the pictures or reports showing the impact on our environment by no humans on our roads, rails, and routes, not to mention the other positive results to wildlife and other eco-factors. Yes, the change we saw was not really within our control at the time, but it supports the question about what could be accomplished if there was more of a conscious effort. When thinking about our ecosystems and the factors we can control, we can't help but think about our individual efforts and the state's mission to promote a lasting impact on our public health and environment. This may seem an extreme comparison, but it is one way in which the Commonwealth is demonstrating efforts to better the world in which we live. The state's push on the use of environmentally preferred products, or EPP, may seem to some a long shot, but Massachusetts has long been a leader in many areas, so it should come as no surprise that we would be one of the first to focus on this and appoint someone to lead the charge on how we can create a quote-unquote greener working environment while reducing costs and promoting responsible purchasing. Julia Wolfe, our Director of Environmental Purchasing, not only oversees how the business of procurement in Massachusetts stays on top of EPP best practices, but how we serve as a model for other states and how to assure EPP standards are followed when utilizing a statewide contract. Recently, I had the chance to catch up with Julia and discuss the work her department is engaged in and how it relates to the future expectations around our environment.
Julia, thank you so much for joining us today. Given your schedule over the last few months, I appreciate you making time to talk about your work. It's obvious you are passionate about the topic. How did you land in your current role?
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. You guys are doing an awesome job. So my background is actually environmental, and I first got started at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency out in San Francisco, the Region 9 office, focusing on solid waste and pollution prevention. Then I worked for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for many years in the waste program, and then moved to waste policy and planning, focusing on toxic use reduction. So when I was hired here at OSD, it was really because of my environmental background. I knew nothing about purchasing. And I say every day to folks in the environmental field how complicated procurement is.
Well, first of all, what an amazing background. My goodness. Some of that I didn't even know. So I apologize for not knowing my coworker as well as I thought I did.
That's okay.
And you are correct. The world of procurement and purchasing is a lot more complicated than a lot of people, I think, can imagine. Well, for the benefit of those that might not be familiar with the world of EPP, briefly describe the executive order, I think it was 515, that has brought us to the current day in regard to procurement. Expand on that a little bit.
Absolutely. So we have Executive Order 515. It was signed in 2009, and it's called Establishing an Environmental Purchasing Policy for the Commonwealth. And what it did is it required agencies to choose environmentally preferable products if they were, and this doing finger quotes right now, readily available, perform to a satisfactory standard, and earn the best value of the Commonwealth, end quote. So the focus has been on energy and water efficiency, recycled content, waste minimization, other sustainable materials, and also toxics reduction. And previous to this executive order, there was really a much deeper focus on recycled content. And with the new executive order, it shifted the focus to toxics in products. And so part of the executive order created a toxic reduction task force. And it's a multi-agency task force. And the goal is really to identify toxics of concern, whether they're in products on statewide contract, and then trying to figure out how to find alternatives for those. So an example of this was our green cleaning products, where we set up the first statewide multi-state contract for greener products. And we required chemicals and paper products to have an environmental third-party certification. We were really the first that did this. And the green cleaning products contract, the previous one, FAC 85, because we're now at FAC 118, we just rebid it. But I added up, we did over $105 million in spend over the life of that contract. So we're using our purchasing power to push the market to environmentally preferable products. I really think we did with green cleaning products. And then two other things about Executive Order 515 I think is important is that it allows us to set minimum environmental specifications for products and services. And it also requires us to do an annual progress report every year.
Interesting. Well, once again, you supported the fact that Massachusetts is ahead of the pack on something else, of course, as we move forward. Despite the Green Task Force and the other things that you've been engaged in your efforts, what is the biggest challenge you experience in doing your job? What could make it easier for you?
Oh, great question, Kelly. So I think the biggest challenge is really making sure that our buyers know all about the EPP options that are available on the contracts. We have thousands upon thousands of environmentally preferable options. So the contract that I just mentioned above, FAC 85 alone has 23,000 products.
Oh my goodness.
Right. It's just an enormous amount. So take that times, 53, 55, 60 contracts, we have just thousands of products available. And another challenge is really getting buyers to choose those products, especially if a conventional product has a lesser price tag. So we try to educate our buyers to think about the life cycle of the products, to really consider environmental and health issues of the products. So for example, if a product sticker price was cheaper, but it had toxic chemicals in it, which are required to be safely disposed at the end of its useful life, the buyer really needs to take that cost into consideration, right? So this is what we're trying to educate buyers on. Another thing, what could make it easier for us to have more all EPP contracts? That makes it much easier for buyers. And I think we have about 10 right now, and it takes the choice out of it, right? So all you have to do is go to the contract, everything on there, like FAC 118. And also for vendors to label products better, and for our e-procurement system to have the ability to tag a product as an EPP. Unfortunately, Comvise doesn't have that ability right now. So we're working to try and figure out solutions to that.
Well, definitely you emphasize there's more than just the cost to the buyer, there's the cost to the environment on some of our choices. So,
absolutely.
Well, annually, I know that you prepare a report on EPP. And beside the fact that we at OSD don't see you for the many months it takes to research and prepare that important document, many of us walk down the hall, Julia, where have you been? Who would you say is your primary audience for this report?
Well, we do write the report for the governor, also for all the contract users, in addition to many of the nonprofits that we work with. We work with the Responsible Purchasing Network, the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, the Center for Environmental Health. We have many other nonprofits that we work with. So they are all very interested to see what we are doing. And I think the biggest takeaways from the report in general, year after year, is that we have the ability to measure 4 things. And note, this is only as good as the data that we get from the vendors in our vendor report management system. That's the biggest caveat with all of this, is that, so we measure how much spend have we done each year on environmentally preferable products, the tons of materials diverted from disposal to recycling. And then for some products, we calculate savings to buyers, which is really super important for folks to see. And then, especially now, more than ever, we try to calculate for certain products metric tons of carbon equivalent reduced for choosing environmentally preferable products and services. And we do this every year. Those are the metrics that we are focusing on. I think the biggest issues are, how do we decarbonize our contracts to meet state policy and also the regulations from the new Climate Change Act, which is calling for the Commonwealth to meet net zero emissions by 2050, right? Very important.
Which is just around the corner.
It really, it's going to come sooner than we think. But also the leading by example Executive Order 594, it also identifies many areas of focus to decarbonize. And just to define decarbonize, the term decarbonize, it means, how do we choose products and services that do not use fossil? That's really what we're talking about. So I'm trying to explore that in all of our contracts. How do we put language in there to encourage or to require, products that are not using fossil fuels?
Wow, it's quite a feat. Quite a feat you are taking on, more so than as always. Well, currently our EPP spans approximately 57 to 58 of our contracts. Although it's probably not realistic that every current statewide contract could engage the use of EPP, do you imagine us getting pretty close?
That's a really good question. So I think there are still a lot of opportunities to find environmentally preferable options in all of our contracts. But I do want to just point out, we not only focus on environmental specifications for goods and services, but also looking at the vendors themselves. We're looking for vendors that are really thinking about their carbon footprint and how to reduce their carbon footprint. So in all of our bids, we have a form called the Current Environmental Practices Form. And this is where bidders who can document that they've made steps to reduce their carbon footprint, they might receive additional evaluation points of bid, which could, put them at an advantage in the evaluation for an award. So I think we can definitely expand more to more contracts, but also really shifting the focus to trying to get vendors that are really thinking about these issues and make a huge difference.
Well, I know just from my own personal experience as a contract manager and utilizing the EPP form, having looked at forms of days gone by, it's nice to see how much more drilled down the form has gotten as far as the different areas that really and should be thinking about as far as their company, what they're using, how they're approaching the use of EPP products, and also some of the things that maybe we don't necessarily think about that could be included in that. I think that that's really provides a lot more reasons for them to think and strive to have some objectives around being really focused on that initiative.
Absolutely. And I do think that the bids really are an opportunity for us to gauge the marketplace and to ask questions about what we can do in the marketplace and push for.
So finally, something that's been on all of our minds, how do you think the issues that we are all experiencing in regard to supply chain, how it's going to impact the use of EPP or such programs as we move forward?
Yeah, really, really good question. So I think everyone is thinking about fossil fuels right now, which is completely connected to many of the supply chain issues that we're experiencing. It's hitting everyone in their pocketbooks. And I think it's forcing many to kind of understand that link to products and services and the importance to finding solutions that are not reliant on fossil fuels, right? There's an enormous amount of funding from the federal government, from states, looking at all that stuff. And then recently, I've had a number of multinational vendors contact me to find out what they could be doing better. Because right now, their buyers are asking for more environmentally preferable products. So it's a really interesting time, right? And way more than usual, right? I'm getting more and more questions. In addition, I think there's a lot of news about chemicals in the environment, from drinking, lead in drinking water to PFAS, or they're called polyfluoroalkyl substances in products, which seem to be in everything these days. And it's
Say that fast 5 times, Julia.
I know. I finally got it down. I couldn't say it for the longest time, but now I finally got it down. But it's really making a lot of buyers think about the products that they're purchasing. So I think it's really a very interesting time for environmentally preferable.
So Julia, when you think about, EPP and the direction that OSD, or the Commonwealth in general, is going, what are some final thoughts you think that we really should be focused on, and how we can possibly expand?
I think that what's really amazing about the Commonwealth is that we've had a dedicated person in my position for about 25 years. So we have a very robust program. I have folks calling me weekly to find out how we're doing things, what we're doing. We're really a leader, and it's not just a reflection of me, it's a reflection of this whole program. And, I just wanted to thank you guys for having me on, and really do a shout out to everyone at OSD who touches the EPP program. It's not just me. I try to drill that down to everyone. There's an enormous amount of work by each and every sourcing lead that I work with. The MCE group has done such a phenomenal job, all the training folks, and we touch, OVM. So I think there's, definitely more opportunity to make sure that we are integrating those environmental specifications, keeping connected with folks nationally, with other states, and also really keeping connected with all of the agencies in the Commonwealth that are doing an enormous amount right now. So those are sort of my final thoughts.
Well, Julia, thank you so much. You've been just tremendous. You are definitely somebody that we look up to in OSD, and we really appreciate you getting us all in line for OSD to tout EPP.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly.
Julia, we so appreciate you taking the time to educate and update OSD on the topic of EPP. It's important information, and like anything, the more informed we are, the more we realize there is an environmental cost to the products we use.
This concludes today's episode on OSD's Environmentally Preferable Products program. For more information about the EPP program, visit mass.gov/EPP. OSD looks forward to engaging with you on our social media and YouTube accounts. Links to those are in the description box. Send your feedback or ideas for future podcasts to the Pod Squad at osdoutreach@mass.gov. This episode was engineered and edited by Layla Palmer and hosted by Kelly Thompson Clark. Thank you for joining us.